Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review is brought to you in part by Rogers Hobby Center in Saginaw, Michigan, where the fun begins. This review covers the Freightliner FLC tractor. It's a 124 scale kit from AMT, number 1195. Now, Freightliner Trucks is it's an American truck manufacturer. It was founded in Oregon about 1929 as the truck manufacturing arm of Consolidated Freightways, and that's where it got its name. Now, the company is now part of Daimler from Germany, and they produce a large range of vans and heavy and medium duty trucks. Now, the company also popularized the use of the cab-over semi-tractor, and the AMT is reboxed this kit, but it started out in 1983 as an Italeri kit, got new parts in 88 and 07, and finally it's released in 2020 in this version. Now when you're done with the kit, it's 13.5 inches long, 6 inches high, and 4 inches wide. Oh, that must be Newt. Newt, you got a question? Come on in here.
This model looks really sharp. Are the real Freightliners expensive?
Well, the price of a new Freightliner varies widely, depending on the options you get on it. But new Freightliners can cost over $100,000. And there's also the average annual cost of maintenance, which can run $15,000 to $20,000 by itself. And you still have to pay for 20,000 gallons worth of diesel fuel every year. But the good news is, the tractor will usually last about 15 years or more. Here are the parts in this kit. There's 282 pieces, and the box says over 275, and there are. It's quite a massive kit. Now, they're molded in white, gray, silver, black, chrome, and they have a vinyl tree for tires. We'll be using mostly liquid cement for this, sometimes super glue, and even some white glue or crystal clear for the windows. Please remember to use the manufacturer's safety and use guidelines when you're using any of the products that you see or hear mentioned in the review. Here are the decals for the kit. They're very nice looking, and they're an updated decal sheet for this model. The register is good and the colors are great and complementary. I recommend that you use some setting solution to apply these, along with plenty of warm water to place them into position. Construction on this model starts with the frame, so remove the frame parts here and clean up the attachment points and the seam lines. Now we'll be gluing them together with some liquid cement, but you must make sure that the frame is flat and square. Once it starts to set up, put some weight on it to make sure that it stays nice and flat, so all the wheels will contact the ground properly. While the frame is drying, we can work on some of the other front end parts here. So you'll grab these pieces, and we're going to use a screwdriver that is chrome plated to keep it from sticking, and we're going to warm that up for some of the parts to assemble. Some of the pins are given that treatment as opposed to glue, and it works pretty well if you're careful. Now, there are also some marks on some of the parts, some pin marks and ejector pin marks, and I use some modeling putty to clean that up. Sometimes too I'll write or scribe the part numbers on them after removing from the tree to make sure they don't get mixed up later on. Now, after melting the pins, the king pins together there, we'll be gluing together the front suspension parts, and it will look like this. After the construction, your tires will be posable so that they move and act like this. Now we can begin construction on the rear axle assemblies, and you can see you'll need the parts in the directions here, and they go together pretty well, but once again, keep everything flat and true and symmetrical so that everything is in sync. Now, step 3 has a considerable number of pieces and processes, but they all fit together well, and the glue points are pretty clearly marked and indicated. Once again, refer to these instructions to see sub-assemblies and then final assemblies. Now, clean up the airbags, the carriers, and the shocks and glue those together to the frame. And then we're going to remove any of the imperfections from the rear axle assembly and parts. And then we're going to put the axle halves together. Now, I typically, once they're glued, will scrape off that seam and then smooth that out, sometimes with or without some putty, depending on how mismatched they are. They're never perfect, but there's always a seam. It's up to you, and it depends on how you want to finish your model. You'll also want to place the springs, axles, and the rear drive shaft before the glue sets, kind of as a unit, one piece at a time there. But then when you do that, use a little slower setting glue. I still use some liquid cement, but it's slower setting, and make sure everything is square and true and that the parts are fitted fully, before you let the glue set. Alignment's been pretty good so far with all the pieces, but there's always an unintentional piece of sprue or something that sometimes gets in the way. So make sure you clean them up well and that you follow the instructions, and your assembly will go together and be properly made to provide a base for the rest of the vehicle and keep those wheels on the ground. The engine assembly is next, and it's a pretty good representation. I would say it looks very clean. Some of the, of course, the details molded in, but those can be picked out fairly easily because it's pretty nicely detailed. Now, gather the engine parts and remove any imperfections. Once again, you'll have a sprue attachment points and even perhaps some sinks, and the ubiquitous parting line where the seams go together. So if you want to clean up those seam lines, follow the same process as the back end pieces there, and once you're glued together, sand those smooth, and maybe use some putty on them if desired, and it depends on how much of it is viewable after the engine's in place. Now, I sprayed the thing after assembling the engine halves, the belt assemblies, and the valve covers, intake, and the starter. I painted those with a product called Stenalerts, and it's a primer that has just about the right semi-gloss sheen for body parts, okay? And I also painted the body parts and interior parts while those were drying. So now, glue on the remainder of the engine components, and after the engine is complete, I sprayed it with some primer and a coat of Tamiya Dark Yellow XF60 paint, which is really close to the Cummins yellow, and then use some rubber black for the belts and a rust color for the exhaust and the turbocharger, or the turbo, yes. And then I painted the filters, as you see there, a flat white. Locate the parts for the wheel and tire assemblies, and then, as you can see from the instruction, they're fairly basic. There's nothing surprising here, so they go together fairly easily. Now, first I painted the inner rim parts with some aluminum, and then while that's drying, I cleaned up the vinyl tires and scuffed the tread for a little wear look. The inner side of the dualies, they don't need the seam cleaned off because they can't be seen. But while I was cleaning up the rim parts, I found a short shot where the plastic didn't fill the mold, and it's on the on my sample, the rear chrome rim, shown here by the red arrows. So I don't know if it would be noticed. So I glued the rim parts back together and let them dry. Remember, always remove paint or chrome plating when you're gluing pieces. And then I pushed the tires over the rims. So in the next step here, 6 and 7 are basically all part of attaching things to the frame. So we're going to first remove the chrome parts from the tree carefully, and you don't want to have to cover too many blemishes if you cut them too close. And There should be a better way to deal with chrome parts, but nothing looks as good as plated parts, really. Assemble the chrome parts, let them dry, and then place them on the frame, and slide the inner duals on the axles, and glue the retainer to the axle so that only the wheel spins. Now place the front wheels on the front axle and glue the cap to the axle only. Now again, that'll allow the wheels to turn. Glue the outer duals to the inner duals only and not to the axle or retainer, and this will allow those to spin as well. Glue in the radiator, the engine, and the exhaust, and these parts line up very easily, and there's positive glue points. The mud flaps and the guards are glued in place, and the tail lights are put into place with the license plate holder. Now the tail light lenses were painted with a chrome pen for the trim and then accented with some clear red. The fifth wheel frame is glued to the frame along the cab mount cross member. And the diamond plate platform, part 112C, it's hard to place at this time, so I'll wait until the sleeper is about ready to go in before proper placement. If you don't want to plan on having the trailer on this, glue the fifth wheel plate on with a slight rear tip and then gloss the top because it is well greased. I'm not going to glue the fifth wheel plate on until I get the trailer to ensure proper alignment. Now the frame is complete. Prime the interior parts if you haven't already, and after that's dried, clean them up and then make sure to paint the floor some brown and the seats a brown leather color. Leave the dash semi-gloss black and detail the remaining parts with chrome and some black rubber. Now I'd been expecting some fit issues here, but I haven't found any so far. The dash components took a couple of test fits, but they seem to align pretty well. After test fitting, glue the interior together and place the instrument decals on the dash. The decals are pretty nice. They are just about the right flexibility and they have a good set. Use a little clear gloss on them, even some pledge floor gloss to make them look more realistic. Now we'll skip a step in the instructions and work on the interior and prime and paint the cab parts and detail the interior panels with some chrome and some rubber black. Now after you test fit, assemble the cab around the interior using some clear part cement for the clear parts. And then I glue the mud flaps and hinges to the hood and make sure that the mud flaps are parallel with the back of the hood, or they will interfere with the air cleaners when opening and closing it. Now for the sleeper, I painted the blanket a buff color and the sheets and pillows white. The remainder of the sleeper interior was painted leather brown, and then the sleeper was assembled after some test fitting, and I masked off the sleeper entrances on the cab and the sleeper and masked off the windows with some micro scale micro mask product. After some light sanding and another coat of primer, I painted the cab and the sleeper with some gloss black X1 Tamiya. After the paint was dry, I glued the grill into the hood and glued the hood hinge pin in place so that it would be on the pivot on the frame. And after some test fitting, I glued the cab onto the frame. The intake pipes, still no fit issues there. After the glue's dried, placed the large cab decals on the cab. And there was a little powder on the decals. Just wipe that off first. That's to keep it from sticking to the packaging film. And use plenty of warm water and put it on the cab. They were very pliable, not brittle, and they went down nicely, even over the raised details. Those are very good decals. After the cab decals, I placed the license plate and the Freightliner decals into position. And something in the tire vinyl can cause some staining, so just be careful when you're handling that. Now we'll add the rest of the shiny pieces to the model, and some of these are pretty fragile, but you still need to carefully remove the chrome from any part that needs to be glued at the location where the glue is placed. Now we're going to use the clear lenses and the clear parts here too, so they get glued to the chrome parts using some clear part cement. Now the chrome parts are mostly placed on the cab with small amounts of super glue, and the amber lenses were painted with some Tester's turn signal amber and the red was painted with Tamiya X27. Chrome touch-ups are made with a chrome pen, and I did not use the hood latches because I wanted the hood to open and the latches would interfere with the hood movement. Next we'll deal with the sleeper and place the decals on it, and then test fit the sleeper after they're well dried. Glue the diamond plate platform to the frame behind the sleeper and visualize the decal placement and remove the sleeper. Now place the decals on the sleeper, checking the placement, and when the decals are set, glue the sleeper into place. It's hard to believe, but these are all the pieces that I had left after viewing all those parts when I laid out the kit. And after removing the window masks and cleaning off any fingerprints, I used a chrome pen on some of the details like the door handles. And finally I gave the body parts a coat of Pledge floor finish through my spray gun after being careful not to get any of the gloss on the frame. And then the kit went together overall very well, and the decals were excellent. Actually, this is a fairly straightforward kit. Even an inexperienced modeler should be able to assemble this kit with perhaps some supervision. And then it dresses up real nicely, and you could detail it even more so as an experienced modeler could. But this is the kind of thing that you can be proud of. I mean, it is really a nice looking display. It's impressive. I love the color combination that they suggest on the box art with these decals. Yeah, you could use different color, blue maybe, or gray, but it looks really good with the jet black. And overall, it's an excellent kit. It goes together well, and if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf. Well, we hope you like this premium step-by-step scale model kit review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. But you can find us on Facebook and our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.